hour, we do want to hit your latest political headlines, giving you a live look out in Washington, D.C. Cloudy and overcast skies there on this Saturday as we are following the latest, learning just hours before a shutdown was set to start. Congress passed a bill to keep the government funded for the next 6 months. A lot to discuss. Fox News correspondent Christina Coleman joins us now to explain.
The yeas are 54, the nays are 46. The bill is passed.
Up against a midnight deadline, the Senate passed a temporary funding bill on Friday to avoid a government shutdown.
Senator Schumer is my friend. I thank him for helping us get this bill over the finish line.
The bill funds the government through September and includes additional defense funds and nearly $500 million for immigration and customs enforcement. Democrats argue the measure would give President Trump too much flexibility to move money around.
Our caucus will be united in our determination to continue the long-term fight to stop Donald Trump's dangerous war on our democracy and on America's working families.
Republicans found an ally in Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who argued a shutdown could lead to more DOGE cuts. Nearly a dozen Democrats agreed and joined Schumer and Republicans in voting to send the bill to final passage.
I appreciate Senator Schumer, and I think he did the right thing. Really, I'm very impressed by that.
Some House Democrats who largely stood unified against Republicans suggest some in their party have caved.
Our general view is that we do not want to shut down the government. But we are not afraid of a government funding showdown.
The budget bill leaves out California wildfire relief, though President Trump said he wants to address that in a separate Republican bill. In Los Angeles, Christina Coleman, Fox News.
All right, Christina, thank you so much. A lot to discuss this morning on this topic, so let's bring into the conversation political analyst Fred Hicks. Fred, always a pleasure having you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So, Fred, for those unfamiliar with how we even got to this point, there were a lot of eyes on yesterday's Congress. We were just hours away from a potential partial government shutdown. What happened to keep that from becoming a reality?
No, Janae, you're absolutely right. We were on the brink yet again of a government shutdown due to the debt ceiling. And so what happened was about a week or so ago, the Republican caucus, House caucus, united, and they passed what was called a continuing resolution bill. And that resolution allowed for the government to operate for the next 6 months. But because the Constitution requires all of the such bills to originate in the House, it had to go to the Senate for confirmation and requires at least 60 votes for passage there, which means that it required bipartisan support. And so the first part of it was getting Republicans in line for Speaker Mike Johnson, and they excluded Democrats from the process, really, and they passed a bill that they wanted to pass, and they were able to do that because Republicans are in the majority. And so once that bill passed with only one Democrat supporting it in the U.S. House, it then moved over to the Senate, where things got really interesting and contentious, and we weren't sure what was going to happen until late Thursday night when Senate Minority Leader Democrat Chuck Schumer said that he was going to vote for it and encouraged enough senators to vote for it as well. And so by a very narrow margin in the Senate, it passed, and that's going to fund the government for the next 6 months, but the fights will continue for sure.
Well, Fred, a lot of people happy that Congress was able to find some unity across party lines to get this done. But you raise a great point. This is just for the next 6 months. So what happens at that 6-month deadline? Could we face another potential government shutdown?
Absolutely, and unfortunately, this has really become sort of a normal thing over the last 5-6 years here in the U.S., where we battle back and forth about whether or not we're going to pay our bills and allow us to have enough money to continue paying our bills. So 6 months from now, when we get into September, we could very well be facing the same thing, particularly from a Democrat's perspective, if Donald Trump and Elon Musk continue to take a chainsaw, to use the metaphor and the image that Elon Musk put out there to the government, and if Republicans continue to make the kind of moves that they've made in the last few weeks and really since January 20th. There's a lot still to be decided. The main issues around immigration, around the federal workforce, around presidential power. These are all things that will be reflected in this budget stopgap measure that we're going to look at probably again in 6 months, and the debate that will happen in the intervening time frame.
Fred, and that's the thing. That's pretty much what the viewers want to know this morning. What would make both sides happy to where we don't have to deal with this every few months, where it's like, okay, now we are concerned about this? No, seriously, because it gets people on the verge of being fearful. And of course, fear mongering isn't what we want for any American as they watch our broadcast. But the reality is this is just going to last for the next 6 months. What can happen to stop that from happening months down the line so that we can have years or at least more than 6 months of calmness and tranquility and knowing that our economy isn't in turmoil?
Well, that's not really what we seem to be doing right now. But to answer the question, I think from the minorities' perspective, minority parties' perspective, they want to be included. Again, the House version of the bill passed along straight party lines, with the exception of one defector out of Maine. And so part of the issue for the Democrats in that situation was that they were not included and none of their priorities were reflected. And of course, when you have the numbers, you don't have to do that. But if you want tranquility, if you want comity, then you need to include at least some of the priorities of the minority party. And part of the things that Democrats really want is they want some protections for the federal workforce. They want to make sure that Congress does its job, and rather than letting the executive branch of government manage all of the money, that Congress actually takes back some of its responsibilities. And that's what Democrats would say. I think from the Republicans' perspective, I think they would say that, hey, Democrats, get on board, stop resisting. You're resisting at every turn, every twist. No matter what we do, you're not happy. So, find some places where you're happy, and we'll be willing to compromise. And so I think that's the thought there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's the thing that the Trump administration has been saying. Of course, this is from their focal point, but they're trying to right the wrongs of what they say are from the Biden administration. So, of course, there will be a lot of back and forth as it relates to government spending, because there hasn't been any agreements about how funding has been sent for international wars, for example. Even with what we're seeing with DOGE and Department of Education, there have been a lot of findings since President Donald Trump has been back in office. So, of course, we'll be seeing that happen in real time. Fred, what do people need to look forward to in the next coming days and even months as we're keeping a close eye on Capitol Hill?
Well, Janae, one thing I want to say about what you just said is that this is, from the Trump administration perspective, this is not just about Joe Biden. They're trying to change fundamentally how Washington works. And so that goes back, and he often points to, as you mentioned, international wars, he often points to the last Bush administration as well. So this is, I think Democrats do need to understand this, that this is about changing Washington completely. This is not just about Republican versus Democrat kind of thing. Now, I think for our viewers, an important thing to look for over the next few weeks is to see what happens, continues to happen on immigration. And if you see any kind of movement around protection for federal workers, that's really the core issue here. Is the two core issues: protection for federal workers and the kind of access that Elon Musk has to the government databases and to make decisions for the government. Those are two real things that are kind of thick stick, so to speak, in the crowd of Democrats. And I think that's the thing that's been really kind of propelling the news cycle for the last month or so, news cycles. And so look to see that, because that right now is really kind of the interesting thing. What is Elon Musk's role? Will he continue to have the kind of access that he's had? Or will Republicans in the House and the Senate say, you know what, Mr. President, we want our power, and we want to continue moving and doing our job. So that's going to be the really interesting thing to watch, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, over the next few weeks.
Fred Hicks, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for breaking down both sides of the aisle for this contentious conversation. I hope you have a great weekend, okay?
Thank you. You do the same. Be safe.
Thank you. I want to show you the latest from Speaker Mike Johnson. He put this out on X moments ago. He says, quote, Republicans have again stood together to get the job done, this time to pass a CR that freezes spending and funds the government for the remainder of fiscal year 25. He goes on to say, shamefully, 99% of Democrats in Congress voted to shut down the government simply because they seem to hate President Trump more than they love America. Never forget that Democrats voted to withhold the paychecks of our troops, Border Patrol agents, and TSA employees, health care and benefits for veterans, and essential services and programs just to make a meaningless political point. Speaker Johnson concludes this tweet by saying, while Democrats try to use the American people as political pawns, Republicans are working to deliver real positive results for everyone. As Fred mentioned, we'll be keeping a close eye on both sides of the conversation as, again, this is just for the next 6 months. So we'll see what's happened for a potential government shutdown then. 9:07 here on the East Coast. Let's go to our first 2-minute commercial break of the hour. We'll be right back.